Betrayal kept entering. Shroom husband chose them and threw us out. My husband told me I wasn't wife material, while his mother stood behind him nodding. That sentence still burns in my chest. Eric and I were supposed to be a family, me, him, and our newborn baby. Instead, we were trapped inside his parents' house, where the walls felt like glass, and every boundary was shattered. From the start, I knew privacy wasn't part of the deal. His parents came into our room without knocking. Sometimes I'd be halfway through changing clothes, pulling a shirt on backwards in panic when the door would swing open and one of them would stroll in like it was their right. Once his father walked in, while I was practically undressed, I froze, skin burning with shame, and he just muttered something before leaving as if nothing about it was wrong. I begged Eric to do something. He shrugged. "They're just used to it," he said, as if my humiliation was just an inconvenience I should learn to live with. And the dogs. God, the dogs. Dirty, untrained scratching at the kitchen floor, where they slept, leaving messes the family pretended not to notice. My baby's doctor had already warned us, no animals, not with her sensitive skin and allergies. But instead of listening, Eric rolled his eyes, muttered about overprotective doctors, and ignored the welts that sometimes rose on our daughter's arms. His parents treated their pets like royalty. My baby's health didn't even come second. It didn't come at all. Still, I tried to endure. Because when you're exhausted, bleeding from childbirth, barely sleeping, and terrified of failing your baby, sometimes you tell yourself maybe I can last a little longer. Then came that Sunday morning. Our baby woke crying hungry. My breasts weren't producing enough milk. Stress had dried me up weeks ago. We had been supplementing with formula, but the tin was empty. I had reminded Eric days earlier to pick some up. He didn't. He didn't even answer. When I asked again that morning, just rolled over in bed with a groan. The sound of my daughter crying clawed at me. I sat on the edge of the bed, trembling, helpless. My baby's wails cut through me, and I couldn't feed her. The shame and despair swallowed me whole. That's when his mother barged in, like she always did, without knocking. "Breakfast has been ready for ages," she snapped. I whispered, barely holding myself together. "I'm not hungry. I need to get milk for the baby." She narrowed her eyes. Always an excuse. Always some drama. She left. I thought that was the end of it. But minutes later, she stormed back in, voice raised so loud, I flinched. "You're inconsiderate, always like this? We're not here to cater to your whims? If you don't want to be part of this family, then don't." I sat, frozen, tears streaking down my face, my baby in my arms. And then Eric appeared. My husband, the man who had promised to protect me, picked up a suitcase, tossed it at my feet, and spat the words that split my world apart. "Pack your things. You're done here. You can't even feed our baby properly. Don't insult my family again." I stared at him, waiting for the cruel joke to end. But he meant it. His eyes were hard, his mother standing behind him, arms crossed, triumphant. "Eric," I whispered, "please. She's crying. I need you. We're supposed to be," I said. "Pack," he barked louder now, as though volume could cover up the betrayal. In that moment, I wasn't his wife. I wasn't the mother of his child. I was the enemy, someone who had inconvenienced the little kingdom he shared with his parents. My hands shook as I stuffed clothes into the bag, one arm holding my baby close. I could feel my body trembling with every movement, every sob that ripped free, no matter how hard I tried to swallow it down. Eric didn't help. He didn't touch the baby. He just stood there watching me with disgust. Until finally, he turned away. I carried the suitcase to the car he had borrowed from his father. He drove me to our small apartment in silence. Not a word, not even a glance. When we arrived, I sat crying in the doorway as he pulled the suitcase out, dropped it by the wall, and walked back to the car. He didn't say goodbye. He didn't check on his daughter. He just left, retreating back to his parents' house, like that was where he truly belonged. That night, I stayed awake, holding my baby, rocking her, as tears soaked her tiny blanket. I thought of the girl I used to be, the one who believed love could survive anything, the one who thought marriage meant partnership, not exile. But here I was, abandoned in my own apartment, while my husband lay comfortably under his parents' roof. And all I could hear in my head, looping like a curse, were his words, "You're not wife material." The first night in our apartment was unbearable. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. I sat on the floor with my baby asleep against my chest, staring at the suitcase Eric had thrown at me. Clothes half folded, bottles missing, baby supplies incomplete. It didn't feel like moving out. It felt like being exiled. I kept waiting for the sound of his car pulling up, for the knock on the door, for some shred of remorse. Instead, hours passed and all I heard was the hum of the refrigerator and my baby's shallow breaths. When he finally walked in, it was close to midnight. He didn't look at me, didn't ask if I was okay. He just stretched out on the couch, grabbed a blanket, and closed his eyes. "Eric," I whispered. My voice cracked, but I pushed on. "We need to talk, please," he groaned. "Not tonight." But I couldn't stop myself. The words poured out like blood from an open wound. "I can't do this alone. She needs milk. She needs a father. I need a partner, not this." His eyes snapped open, then filled with a coldness that didn't belong to the man I married. "Don't start. You made things worse by disrespecting my parents. They've done everything for me, for us, and you just..." He gestured angrily as if my mere presence was the offense. I felt my chest tighten. "Disrespect. Eric, your mother barged into our room while I was crying, while the baby was screaming. She yelled at me instead of helping. And you..." My voice broke. "You threw me out, with our baby in my arms." He sat up slowly, like he was ready to deliver a verdict. "You're not wife material if you can't handle living with my family. I can't take your side against them. They're my parents, They raised me, they come first. The words landed like blows. My parents lived 2 states away. I had left them behind for him. For this marriage, for the man who now looked me in the eye and admitted I would always come second. Eric. I said barely above a whisper. We have a daughter. Doesn't she come first? His mouth curled into something cruel. A daughter who can't even be fed properly because her mother's too stressed to produce milk. I felt my face burn. Postpartum guilt is a shadow that lingers on every new mother. And he knew exactly where to strike. My milk supply had been dwindling since birth. Stress, exhaustion, anxiety. But he framed it as my failure. My fault. I held our daughter tighter, shielding her from his venom. Do you even hear yourself? I asked, tears brimming. She cries because she's hungry, and instead of helping you, blame me. He stood, then grabbed his keys from the table. I don't have to stand here and listen to this. Stay if you want. Or leave. But don't expect me to fight my parents for you. The door slammed behind him, rattling the frame. That night, I sat awake, scrolling through my phone, searching for answers for comfort for anything. I ended up on forums, reading stories from women I never knew, their words blurring with mine. Some told me I wasn't crazy. That stress does kill milk supply. That being blamed for it is abuse. Others said what I didn't want to hear. If he's already chosen them over you once, he'll do it again. I wanted to believe they were wrong. I wanted to believe he would wake up and remember the vows we made, the promises whispered in the dark. Instead, every message he sent over the next 2 days was clipped transactional. Did you buy formula? Don't let my mom think you're ignoring her calls. Stop making drama. We're fine. We weren't fine. We were broken, and I was the only one still bleeding. By the 3rd day, I realized I couldn't keep waiting for a miracle. I called my parents. I hadn't told them everything yet, just hints, excuses, softened truths. But my voice cracked as I said, Mom, I think I need to come home for a while. She didn't ask questions. She just said, come. Bring the baby. We'll figure it out. I booked a flight for the end of the week. Eric had to sign the authorization papers for me to travel with our daughter. He did it without hesitation, almost with relief, as if sending us away made things easier for him. That night, I sat in the apartment surrounded by boxes I hadn't unpacked. The baby's tiny cries echoed against the empty walls. I rocked her, whispering promises I wasn't sure I could keep. I'll protect you. I'll make sure you grow up knowing what love really looks like, even if it kills me. And for the first time, I admitted the truth I'd been avoiding. I wasn't begging for my marriage anymore. I was begging for my child's future. I didn't expect my lifeline to come from strangers, but when your world has collapsed and you're too ashamed to tell your own parents the full story, you start clinging to the voices that echo your pain. At 2 a.m, when the baby was finally asleep on my chest, and the apartment was so silent, it felt like a tomb, I opened my phone. My hands shook as I typed into a forum I had lurked on for months but never posted in. I spilled everything: Eric's loyalty to his parents, the invasion of privacy, the dogs, the milk, the suitcase. By sunrise, the replies came pouring in. Hun, this isn't your fault. Stress kills supply. Anyone who blames you is ignorant. He's married to his mom, not to you. You'll never come first. Please leave. You and your baby deserve peace. That house is poison. Each comment was a shard of truth. Some cut deep, others soothed, but together they formed a mirror I couldn't ignore. For the first time, I saw what outsiders saw, not a struggling marriage, but abandonment dressed as tradition. Still, I couldn't stop defending him in my head. He wasn't always like this. I remembered the university boy who walked me home after late classes, the man who held my hand in the hospital as contractions tore through me. I kept replaying the moment he kissed our baby's forehead for the first time. That man existed, didn't he? Or had he always been his parents' puppet waiting for me to fall out of line so they could pull the strings tighter? I scrolled again. One comment hooked me. Ask yourself, what would you do if your own mother tried to destroy your child before it was even born? I froze. That's what it felt like. His mother wasn't just meddling, she was dismantling me piece by piece, starting with the one thing that tethered me to sanity motherhood. By blaming me for low milk supply, they weren't just criticizing. They were erasing me as a mother altogether. I wanted to reply. I wanted to scream into the void that I loved Eric, that I wasn't ready to give up. Instead, I opened another thread and read stories from women who stayed, who fought, who broke themselves trying to fix men who never left their mother's shadows. Most ended the same: divorce papers, custody battles, years wasted. I thought about Eric asleep on his parents' couch, his mother bringing him breakfast, his father praising him, while I struggled to buy formula. I thought about how quickly he signed the papers letting me take our baby out of state, like we were luggage he was tired of carrying. The comments kept coming. He's already chosen. Believe him the first time. You're begging a locked door to open. Don't waste years waiting for regret. Build a life he can't destroy. I cried reading them, not because they were cruel, but because they were mercilessly honest. Strangers, faceless names on a screen had given me more clarity in a few hours than my husband had in months. But clarity doesn't erase love. I still loved him, pathetically desperately. Even as he cut me down, I longed for the boy who once chose me over everything. I typed another post almost like a confession. I feel stupid for waiting for him to walk back through that door. I feel pathetic for loving someone who left me standing at the edge of the bed begging him to stay. Replies surged again. You're not stupid. You're trauma bonded. Love doesn't vanish just because the person turned cruel. But love isn't enough to raise a child. You've lost your self-esteem. Don't lose your child's safety too. That last one lodged in my chest. My baby stirred in her sleep, tiny fingers twitching against my arm. She didn't choose this chaos. She didn't deserve to be raised in a battlefield where her father's silence was as loud as his mother's screams. By dawn, I was hollowed out. My eyes ached. My chest felt scraped raw. But something inside me shifted. I realized I was done begging Eric for recognition. If I begged any more, it would be for my daughter's future, not his approval. I closed the forum tab but kept the words in my head like armor. You're not stupid. You're trauma bonded. Love isn't enough. The next morning, I packed a small bag. Formula diapers, my ID, the travel authorization papers Eric had signed so easily. The flight wasn't until later in the week, but I wanted to be ready. Ready for the moment I stopped waiting at a locked door. And as I zipped the bag, I whispered to myself, the line I had read in one of the comments, a mantra I would carry forward. He already showed you who he is. Believe him. It was supposed to be a simple morning. Eric had offered to drive me and the baby to her physical therapy session. For a moment, I almost let myself believe this was a sign of him softening, that maybe beneath all the cruelty, there was still a father who cared. But I should have known better. When we came back, the apartment felt wrong. The instant I stepped inside, the air was too still. The closet door was ajar, empty hangers swaying slightly. My stomach dropped. I walked room to room, baby clutched against my chest, scanning the hollow spaces. His clothes gone, his shoes by the door gone, the desk where he used to leave his textbooks cleared. Even the coffee mug he always used, chipped at the handle, was missing. He hadn't driven us to therapy out of kindness. He had done it to buy time, to clear himself out of our lives without having to face me. I sat on the bed and cried until I couldn't breathe. My baby stirred and whimpered as if she felt the storm rolling through me. I rocked her, whispering apologies she couldn't understand. I'm sorry. I didn't see it coming. I didn't know he'd leave us like this. I called my sister. Her voice crackled through the speaker. He waited until you were gone to take everything. Yes, I choked. Like a thief in his own home. Not a thief, she said firmly. A coward? She stayed on the phone as I wept, grounding me with small reminders. Breathe. Feed the baby. Drink some water. He's not the last chapter of your life. By the time Eric returned the borrowed car, I was ready to confront him. He walked in like nothing had happened, keys jangling in his hand, avoiding my eyes. You moved out, I said flatly. He shrugged. I told you it was over. You didn't tell me you'd strip the apartment like a burglar while I was gone. He dropped the keys on the counter. What did you expect? That I'd stay? You made your choice when you insulted my parents. I'm not living in a war zone of disrespect. I laughed bitter and sharp. A war zone, Eric? Your mother screamed at me while I was holding our crying baby. And you stood there and told me to pack. His expression hardened. Don't twist this. You never fit into my family. You made it clear you don't respect them. I can't take your side against them. The words rang familiar, like an echo of every conversation since the day we moved in. His parents first? Always. Me and the baby? Never. I stepped closer, trembling, but steady enough to say what needed to be said. What about us? About her? I tilted my head toward our daughter asleep in my arms. He didn't even look. I'll send money. That's all you need from me. That was the moment something inside me snapped. Money. He thought fatherhood was something you could direct deposit once a month. He thought abandonment could be excused with a wire transfer. No, I whispered. That's not all I need. That's not all she needs. She needs a father who chooses her. And you've made it very clear you never will. He opened his mouth, maybe to argue, maybe to spit another cruel line, but I raised my hand. Don't! I won't beg anymore. For the first time, silence stretched between us with no apologies, no bargaining. Just truth. Eric left a few minutes later, closing the door with a quiet finality that hurt worse than the slam I had expected. I sat in the stillness, staring at the bare walls. The apartment looked less like a home now, and more like a waiting room somewhere temporary, until the real decision came. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time since college. Words spilled out shaky and uneven, but honest. I begged a locked door to open, and when it didn't, I blamed myself. But today I saw it clearly. He wasn't a door. He was a wall, and walls don't open. They just block you until you choose another path. I closed the journal, kissed my baby's forehead, and whispered, we'll find another path. Together. It was the first time in weeks that I believed it. The day I signed the travel papers, my hands shook so badly that the pen left streaks across the form. Eric had shoved the document at me without ceremony. For the baby, he said, as if he was being generous, as if allowing me to leave was an act of kindness instead of rejection. I folded the paper carefully, tucked it into my bag beside a bottle, a pack of wipes, and 2 onesies. My entire life had been reduced to what I could carry on a short flight. At the airport, I watched other families, couples moving like a unit, husbands wheeling strollers while wives cradled babies. I couldn't stop myself from comparing. Why was my baby's father not beside me? Why had he chosen comfort in his parents' home over the chaos of learning to build one with me? On the plane, my daughter slept against my chest, her tiny breaths warm on my collarbone. I stared out the window at the clouds, whispering promises she couldn't understand. It won't always be like this. I'll give you better. You'll never feel unwanted. When we landed, I saw my mother waiting at the gate. She looked smaller than I remembered, but when she pulled me into her arms, I realized she hadn't shrunk. I had. My pain had made me fragile, hunched, diminished. Her embrace was gravity pulling me back to earth. At home, my father carried our bags without saying a word. Later, over tea, he finally spoke. He let you go too easily. It wasn't a question. It was a verdict. My mother stroked my hair like she used to when I was a child. Let things go, she murmured. He'll regret it one day. Until then, you need to live. That night, I lay in my old bedroom surrounded by relics of a younger me, posters, trinkets, the desk where I once planned a future that now felt like it belonged to someone else. My baby stirred in the crib beside me, and for the first time since Eric had thrown the suitcase at my feet, I felt a strange calm. I wasn't in our shared apartment anymore. I wasn't in his parents' suffocating house. I was back where life had once been simple. But simplicity is not the same as healing. The pain still lived in my chest like a tenant refusing to move out. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him turning away from me, saw his hands pushing me toward the door. Days passed slowly. My mother cooked meals, my father made quiet repairs around the house. My sister checked in constantly. They treated me like glass, careful and gentle. I hated that it was necessary. One afternoon, I sat with my mother, my baby asleep between us. I whispered, "Do you think he'll regret it?" She didn't answer immediately. She adjusted the baby's blanket, smoothing it with deliberate care, then looked at me. Regret is easy. Change is hard. Don't build your life waiting for his regret. Build it so you don't need it. Her words sank into me like stones dropped into water, rippling outward. For the first time, I considered the possibility that moving forward might mean moving without him. And yet, late at night, when the house was silent, my heart betrayed me. I found myself staring at the ceiling, hoping for a text, a call, a knock on the door. Love doesn't evaporate just because it's been poisoned. But then I'd hear my baby whimper, and I'd remember she didn't choose any of this. She deserved a mother who was strong enough to build something new, even if her father chose to stay behind. That thought became my anchor. Each morning, I whispered it like a prayer, while I changed diapers, mixed formula, and rocked her in the quiet hours before dawn. She deserves better. I will give her better. And slowly, the shame of coming back home began to shift into something else. Not defeat, but survival. Not exile, but gravity pulling me back to where I could start again. The first week at my parents' house was a blur of silence. I had blocked Eric's number, but my fingers itched to unlock it to check if he had called, if he had asked about his daughter. Every time the urge came, I'd look at her sleeping face and remind myself he already made his choice. But no contact is not the same as no thoughts. His voice echoed in my head when I least expected it at dawn. When my baby cried for milk, I'd hear him saying, "You can't even feed her properly." At night, when the house settled into stillness, I'd hear his mother's harsh voice. "You're inconsiderate, always behaving like this." The words played like recordings I couldn't turn off. My mother tried to distract me with chores, with long conversations over coffee. My father, more pragmatic, suggested I look into finishing my degree, hinted at jobs I might apply for once I had studied myself. I nodded, grateful for their concern, but inside, I was hollow. One night, after rocking my baby to sleep, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the travel authorization Eric had signed. Just a few lines of ink, but those lines represented the moment he gave up. It was proof not of legality, but of abandonment. He had signed me away as easily as he'd shrugged off our vows. The depression came in waves. Some mornings, I couldn't eat, my stomach turning at the thought of food. Other days, I forced myself to drink broth just so I'd have the strength to carry my baby. I had always believed I was strong, that I'd never let anyone reduce me to tears over and over again. But love had a way of hollowing out pride, until all that remained was hope, and hope is cruel when it's misplaced. I told myself, if I don't call him, maybe he'll miss me. Maybe no contact will be the thing that wakes him up. But as days turned into weeks, the silence only deepened. The only messages that came were from my sister sending encouragement, reminding me that healing wasn't weakness, it was resistance. One morning, I watched my baby smile in her sleep, her tiny lips twitching upward. It was the first smile I had seen, fragile and fleeting. Something inside me cracked open. She didn't need a father who could abandon her. She needed a mother who wouldn't. In that moment, I realized zero contact wasn't a punishment for Eric. It was survival for me. Still, the nights were hardest. I would picture him in his parents' house eating meals I used to cook, laughing with them, while I sat in the dark nursing my wounds. The betrayal stung deeper than the rejection itself. He had chosen them, and in doing so, he had chosen a life where I didn't exist. To cope, I began writing letters I never intended to send. Each night, after putting my baby down, I'd take out a notebook and pour everything onto the page. The anger, the grief, the confusion. "You told me I wasn't wife material." I wrote once, "But tell me, what does it mean to be a man who abandons his wife and child?" Another night, "I loved you enough to leave my family for yours. You loved yours enough to throw me away." The words filled pages, and though they didn't erase the pain, they gave it shape. Writing turned chaos into sentences, and sentences into something I could hold at arm's length. My mother found me one morning asleep at the desk, cheek pressed to the paper. She didn't scold me. She just gathered the letters into a neat stack, tied them with a ribbon, and set them gently on my nightstand. "Someday," she said, "you'll look back and see this as the beginning, not the end." I wanted to believe her. The first days of zero contact were a battlefield. My heart pulled me one way, my pride the other. But each morning that passed without his call, without his knock at the door, I felt a tiny shift inside me. The realization was slow but steady. His silence wasn't a mistake. It was his truth. And if his truth was a life without me, then mine had to be a life without him. Hope is a dangerous thing. It sneaks in when the pain feels unbearable, whispering promises you know are lies, but still want to believe. Every morning, I woke up with the same thought, maybe today he'll call. My chest tightened each time the phone buzzed, only to relax into disappointment when it was just my sister checking in or my mother reminding me to eat. Even after weeks of silence, a part of me clung to the fantasy that Eric would walk through the door, scoop up our baby, and apologize for everything. I hated myself for it. Because logic knew the truth, if he wanted us, he wouldn't have thrown me out in the first place. But grief has no patience for logic. It feeds on longing. One evening, while folding tiny onesies fresh from the dryer, I caught myself rehearsing a conversation that would never happen. In my mind, Eric stood before me, eyes wet, voice trembling. I made a mistake. I was weak. Can we try again? And in that vision, I forgave him instantly. No hesitation. No pride. The realization made me sick. Why was I so ready to welcome back someone who had already proven he didn't value me? Was it love? Or was it fear? Fear of raising a child alone? Fear of facing the future without the man I had once believed would stand by me forever. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room, rocking my baby, while the house lay quiet. I whispered, "You deserve more than my weakness." The words caught in my throat because I wasn't sure if I believed them. The temptation of hope followed me everywhere. At the grocery store, I glanced at the entrance, half expecting him to appear. Walking past couples on the street, I'd wonder if he thought of me when he saw families together. Even songs on the radio felt like conspiracies, lyrics twisting into secret messages meant for me. And yet there were small shifts, tiny sparks of strength I hadn't expected. One afternoon, I took my baby for a walk in the park. The air was crisp, the trees painted with autumn. A woman with a stroller smiled at me, and for once I didn't look away in shame. I smiled back. It was such a small thing, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Later, I signed up for an online course to slowly chip away at finishing my degree. My father helped me set up the laptop. My mother watched the baby during my lessons. For the first time in months, I felt forward motion, however fragile. Still at night, temptation pressed hardest. I scrolled through old photos, Eric kissing my pregnant belly, Eric holding our newborn with pride in his eyes. Were those moments lies? Or had he truly loved me then, before the weight of his parents' influence crushed everything I wanted answers, but silence was all he offered? And in that silence, I began to see the truth. The man I hoped for didn't exist anymore. Maybe he never had. One evening, my sister said bluntly, "You keep waiting for him to come back. But what if he does and nothing changes? Will you put your daughter through the same pain?" Her words were harsh, but they pierced the haze of my longing. That night, I wrote another unsent letter. "If you come back tomorrow, I don't know if I'll take you back. Not because I stopped loving you, but because I finally loved myself enough to question it." The temptation of hope still lingered, but it no longer controlled me. Slowly, painfully, I was learning that real hope had nothing to do with him. It had everything to do with me and the baby sleeping safely in my arms. The call came on an ordinary afternoon while I was spooning mashed vegetables into my baby's mouth. My sister's voice was low, cautious, the way people sound when they know they're about to break your heart all over again. "I don't know if you want to hear this," she began, "but his mother is telling people she wants to pair Eric with her best friend's daughter." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The spoon froze in midair, my baby fussing, as if sensing the shift in me. I whispered, "Say that again. She's already setting him up," my sister confirmed. "Like you never existed." The words cut deeper than anything Eric had ever said. Being thrown out was cruel enough, but to know that while I sat here nursing wounds, his family was plotting a replacement, it was betrayal on another level. My body shook, not from sadness, but from rage. I had given everything to fit into their family. I had sacrificed my privacy, endured their disrespect, begged for space that was never granted. And in return, they treated me like a temporary inconvenience, something to be discarded once a shinier option appeared. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My mind replayed every dinner, where his mother scrutinized my every move, every side glance that suggested I'd never be enough. Maybe she had always planned, this always hoped her son would end up with someone else. And Eric, spineless, loyal only to his parents, had handed her the knife she used to cut me out. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to drive to their house and demand answers. But instead, I sat at the desk, opened my notebook, and poured the betrayal onto paper. You didn't just leave me, you erased me. You let your mother write me out of your life as if I was a character she never liked in her story. And maybe you think this makes you strong, but it only proves you were never the man I believed you to be. When I closed the notebook, my hands were trembling. But beneath the tremor, there was clarity. Their betrayal wasn't a reflection of my worth, it was proof of theirs. The whisper spread quickly. A neighbor told my mother she overheard Eric's aunt bragging about the new match for him. Even my cousin mentioned seeing a post on social media, a photo of Eric at a dinner sitting beside a young woman I didn't recognize. The comments beneath were filled with heart emojis and teasing remarks. Each rumor was another stab wound, but strangely, it also became a turning point. The illusion that he might come back repentant and ready to rebuild shattered. Even if he did return, I realized he was no longer mine to trust. His mother had taken the reins, and he had gladly handed them over. One evening, I sat with my baby in my lap and whispered, "They tried to replace us, but they can't. No one will ever be your mother but me, and no one will ever love you the way I do." Saying it out loud felt like reclaiming something they could never take away. The betrayal still stung, but it carried an unexpected gift. It burned away the last remnants of false hope. I no longer wanted Eric to knock on the door, because if he did, I knew he wouldn't be returning as my husband. He'd be returning as a puppet strings firmly in his mother's hands. That night, instead of writing another letter to him, I wrote one to myself. Remember this feeling. Remember how it broke you when you found out he was already being lined up with someone else. Let that pain be your boundary. You deserve better than being anyone's replaceable option. I folded the note and tucked it between the pages of my notebook. It was the first time I wasn't writing to him, but for me. And that, in its own quiet way, felt like survival. After the whispers of betrayal came the silence of clarity. Something inside me shifted. I had spent weeks waiting for his call, waiting for his regret, waiting for his mother's grip to loosen. But the waiting had turned me into a shadow of myself. So I stopped. One morning, I enrolled in an online course to complete the last credits of my degree. It was something I had put off when I became pregnant, telling myself there would always be time later. But now I needed it, not just for the diploma, but for the reminder that I could build a future without asking permission. My father helped me set up a study nook in the corner of the living room. My mother volunteered to watch the baby during my classes. It wasn't easy. I often studied with one hand typing and the other rocking a stroller. But for the first time in months, I felt movement forward. I also began sketching ideas for a café, a dream I had whispered years ago but never pursued. A place filled with warmth where mothers like me could bring their children without judgment, where every corner smelled of coffee and fresh bread. My best friend encouraged me, sending photos of cozy cafes and reminding me I had always loved creating spaces that felt like home. For the first time since Eric left, I started to imagine a life where his name didn't matter. A life where my baby grew up watching me stand on my own 2 feet instead of waiting for a man to rescue me. But rebuilding identity isn't a straight line. Some nights, I still cried into my pillow, grief sneaking back when the house was quiet. Some mornings, I still checked my phone reflexively, half hoping for a message that never came. Healing wasn't neat. It was messy, jagged, filled with backslides. Yet in the mess, I found small victories. Cooking a full meal for my family and watching them smile. Hearing my baby's laugh for the first time, pure and untainted by the chaos her father had left behind. Passing a quiz in my class and realizing I hadn't lost my ability to learn. I even went out once just to buy groceries alone. Standing in line with a basket in my hand, I felt a wave of freedom wash over me. It was such a small thing, but it reminded me I wasn't broken. I was still here, still capable, still me. One evening, while sipping tea, my mother said gently, "You're not the same girl who left here crying weeks ago. You're stronger now." I wanted to believe her. Maybe I wasn't strong yet, but I was trying, and maybe that was enough. The betrayal had burned away my illusions, but it had also cleared the path. Eric could build whatever life his mother chose for him. I would build mine with my own hands, and brick by brick, I began to feel like someone worth being again. Time has a way of softening sharp edges, but it never erases the scars. By the end of that long season, I wasn't the same woman who had been thrown out of her own home with a crying baby in her arms. I had been broken, yes, but in the breaking, something new had taken shape. Eric never came back. Not once. Not with apologies, not with explanations, not even with half-hearted attempts to check in. The silence was its own answer, and while it hurt God, it hurt. I learned that closure doesn't come from someone else's words. It comes from deciding the silence is enough. I kept writing, though the letters shifted. They were no longer addressed to him. They were addressed to myself, to my daughter, to the future I was building piece by piece. Letters that said, "We survived." Letters that promised we'll thrive. Some nights when the loneliness crept in, I still replayed the memories. The early days when Eric made me laugh, when I believed in forever. But instead of wishing him back, I let those memories remind me of what I wanted to feel again someday with someone who actually deserved me. My baby grew stronger, healthier, her laughter filling the house like sunlight. Each milestone, her first crawl, her first babble became proof that life didn't stop when he left. It kept moving forward, and so did we. I often wondered if Eric ever thought of us. Did he scroll through old photos the way I once did? Did he regret the nights he chose silence over a phone call? Did his new life arranged neatly by his mother ever feel hollow? I'll never know. And maybe that's the point. Some questions aren't meant to be answered, they're meant to be lived with. People ask me if I'd ever take him back. The truth is complicated. The girl I was back then, the girl who begged him to stay, who cried herself to sleep, hoping for a knock at the door, she might have said yes. But the woman I am now, the mother I am now, she knows better. She knows love isn't proven in words or vows. It's proven in actions, and his actions told me everything I needed to know. Still, there's a part of me that wonders about the future. What if one day, years from now, he shows up older, heavier, with regret? What if he finally says the words I used to ache for? I can't predict what I'll feel in that moment. Maybe anger, maybe pity, maybe nothing at all. But I know this much, whatever happens, I'll no longer be the woman waiting to be chosen. I'll be the one doing the choosing. And maybe that's the greatest revenge. Not screaming, not proving him wrong, not even hoping he regrets it, but living a life so full, so untouchable, that his memory fades into just another scar I survived. So I close this chapter not with bitterness, but with resolve. Eric may have walked away, but I am still here. My daughter is still here. And together we are writing a story that doesn't need him in it. Ask yourself, what would you do if the person you trusted most chose comfort over you? Would you wait hoping they come back? Or would you like me finally learn that sometimes the only closure you need is your own strength? Thank you for watching and supporting this channel. Every like, subscribe, and comment helps these stories reach more people. Wishing you peace and strength wherever you are.
Yeah.